Tobechukwu put his fist through the wall. Not a door, not a table, the actual wall of Inspector Daike's corridor, plaster cracking around his knuckles, and the sound of it brought two officers to their feet before Inspector Daike raised one hand and they sat back down. Tobechukwu stood with his forehead pressed against the damaged wall, breathing in short, controlled bursts, and Inspector Daike waited with the patience of a man who had seen grief wear every costume available to it. "They are dropping it," Tobechukwu said, not a question. "They are stalling it," Inspector Daike said carefully. "There is a difference." "There is no difference." He turned around. His eyes were dry, but the damage in them was not. "She kidnapped my fiancé, she held her in a room, and because her husband knows the commissioner's name, she is going to walk out of this and relocate abroad and live her life and nothing." His voice cracked once hard, then steadied. "Nothing happens to her." Inspector Daike looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Sit down, Tobechukwu." "I do not want to sit." "Sit down." He sat. Inspector Daike opened his notepad. "The senator has made calls, yes. The commissioner has asked me to handle this with discretion, yes. But I have documented everything, every call log, every social media post, the undertaking terms, the witness statements. What I can give you is a signed legal undertaking that binds Adanna to 0 contact, 0 interference, and 12 months abroad. If she violates it, the documented file goes directly above the commissioner's head." He paused. "It is not the prison sentence she deserves, but it is a chain, and chains have a way of reminding people of their limits." Tobechukwu stared at the floor. His knuckles were bleeding slightly. He did not seem to notice. "Nkechi said she can live with it," he said quietly. "Then maybe," Inspector Daike said, "you should trust the woman you want to marry. Subscribe right now and turn on your notification bell. This is the final part of the man she called broke, and everything, the wedding, the truth, the cost of every secret, lands today. Welcome back." 2 days before that corridor, Nkechi had woken up in Tobechukwu guest room and lain completely still for several minutes, cataloguing her own body the way you do after something frightening, checking for damage, finding none, and then feeling the strange guilt of being physically fine while everything else was fractured. She had gone downstairs and found him already awake, sitting at his kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug, not drinking it, just holding it. He had looked up when she walked in, and the relief that moved across his face was so immediate and so unguarded that it hurt her somewhere she did not have a name for. She sat across from him. She did not say good morning. She said, "Tell me everything. The version you have been editing. I want the original." He looked at her for a moment. Then he set down the mug and he told her. It took 40 minutes. She did not interrupt once. The full story was this. Adanna's husband was Senator Obieze, a man with reach in 3 states and a number saved in the commissioner's phone. When Tobechukwu ended things in London, Adanna had not only called every day for 3 months, she had told him what her husband could do to his business interest in Nigeria if he did not handle the ending quietly, carefully, and on her terms. Tobechukwu had tried. He had been gentle. He had given her time. He had sent money twice when she said she was struggling, which she later used as evidence that he still owed her something. When he finally stopped responding entirely and booked his flight home, she had escalated, and then she had gone quiet. And the quiet, as he had told Nkechi once before, had frightened him more than everything else. He had come back to Nigeria and built his life and told himself the silence meant it was over. He was wrong. When he finished, Nkechi sat with it for a long time. Outside the kitchen window, the estate was beginning its morning, generators cutting off one after the other, a gateman somewhere singing quietly to himself, a city that did not know or care about the weight sitting at this table. Nkechi said finally, "You sent her money." "Yes." "You sent her twice." "Yes." "And you did not tell me that when you told me about her the first time." He held her gaze. "No, I did not." "Why?" "Because I knew how it would sound, and I was afraid of how it would land." Nkechi nodded slowly. She was not shouting. She was doing something more unsettling. She was thinking, visibly and completely, right in front of him, without hiding any of it from her face. He had learnt that this is what she did when something mattered enough to get right. "You have been managing me," she said, "since the beginning, giving me truth in amount I calculated I could absorb. And I understand why. I even understand the fear underneath it." She paused. "But Nkechi, I was in a room with that woman. I sat across from her and looked into her eyes, and I needed to understand what I was dealing with, and I could not, because you had given me an incomplete picture." Her voice did not rise. "That is the part I cannot easily forgive. Not Adanna, you." The silence between them was long and honest and necessary. Then he said, "I know, and I'm not going to ask you to forgive it quickly. I'm just asking you not to leave before you do." She looked at him. Something behind her eyes moved. Before she could answer, the front door opened and Mama Nkechi walked in with a small traveling bag, a container of something that smelled like pepper soup, and the energy of a woman who had received a phone call the previous evening and spent the night deciding what to do about it. She looked at Nkechi first. She looked at her daughter's face, the tiredness in it, the strength in it, the love that was still there underneath all the damage, and she crossed the room and pulled her into her arms without a single word and held her the way only a mother can hold a grown woman who has been trying very hard to hold herself. Over Nkechi's shoulder, she looked at Tobechukwu. He stood up from the table. "Mama," he started. "Later," she said quietly. The word carried everything it needed. He sat back down. "Drop a comment right now. Do you think Nkechi should go ahead with the wedding after everything? Tell us where you are watching from. Like this video and let us finish this story together." Mama Nkechi found Tobechukwu alone in the kitchen an hour later. Nkechi was sleeping, genuinely sleeping, because something about her mother's presence had released a tension she had been holding in her spine since the night of the phone call. Mama Nkechi had watched her daughter's eyes close, and then she had come downstairs quietly and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the man sitting at the table. He stood up when she entered. She gestured for him to sit. She sat across from him in the same chair her daughter had occupied and folded her hands on the table and looked at him with eyes that had seen 60 years of people and could tell with reasonable accuracy what a person was made of. "You love my daughter," she said, "not a question." "With everything I have," he said. "And yet you brought her into a situation she was not prepared for because you were afraid of losing her." She turned her head. "Does that make sense to you now that you hear it said plainly?" He did not look away. "No, it does not." "Good," she said. "A man who defends the indefensible is a man I cannot trust with her. A man who can sit in his own failure without running from it." She paused. "That is something I can work with." She looked at him for another long moment. Then she said, "My daughter is not the kind of woman who breaks, but she is the kind of woman who walks. If you give her sufficient reason, she will pick up everything that belongs to her and she will go and she will not look back." Not because she does not love you, because she loves herself more. And that is exactly how I raised her. She unfolded her hands. "So, I am asking you one question, and I want one honest answer. Are you done keeping things from her?" Not managed honesty, not careful truth. Are you completely, entirely done? Tobechukwu looked at this woman who had raised the person he loved and said, "Yes, I am done. Whatever it costs me to say, I will say it. She deserves that, and I have been giving her less." Mama Nkechi nodded once. Then she stood up and said, "There is pepper soup on the counter. Heat it. You look like a man who has not eaten properly in 3 days." He almost smiled. "I have not." "I know," she said. "I can tell. Eat, then we will talk about this wedding." Across the city, in a government guest house sitting room that smelled of leather and cold air conditioning, Senator Obieze sat across from Adanna and said nothing for a very long time. Adanna sat with her hands in her lap and her chin up, and her composure reassembled as neatly as she could manage it, which was not as neat as usual. There were shadows under her eyes. Her cream silk blouse was slightly creased. For a woman who had always been immaculate, the creases said everything. Senator Obieze was 61 years old, heavy-set, with close-cropped grey hair and the kind of face that had learned long ago not to show what it was thinking. He wore a plain grey senator's kaftan and held a glass of water he had not drank. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and even and more frightening than shouting. "I have spent the last 48 hours," he said, "managing a situation that you created. I have called the commissioner. I have had conversations I should not have needed to have. I have used the weight of my name in ways that diminish it." He set the glass down. "All of this because you could not release a man who chose not to stay." Adanna's jaw tightened. "He used me. He took 4 years and he left. That is what he did. He left, and you chose to build a shrine to it." His eyes were not unkind, but they were absolutely without softness. "I married you knowing you were not over him. I told myself that was something time would resolve. I was wrong, and I had been wrong for long enough." He leaned forward slightly. "You will sign the undertaking. You will go to London for 12 months. You will get the help that I should have insisted on 2 years ago. And when you come back, we will decide together what this marriage looks like going forward." He paused. "Those are the terms. There is no negotiation." Adanna looked at him for a long time. Then she asked, very quietly, "Did you ever love me, or did you only ever manage me?" The silence that followed was the longest in the room. Senator Obieze looked at his hands. Then he said, "I loved the woman I thought I was marrying. I am still waiting to meet her properly." He stood up. "Sign the document, Adanna." She looked down at the paper in front of her. Her hand was steady when she picked up the pen. Her eyes were not. She signed. Meanwhile, in a small rented shop space 3 streets from her apartment, Adaeze was on her knees arranging product on a low shelf, a head wrap on, no makeup, a thin layer of dust on the sleeve of her top, and she looked, unexpectedly, entirely like someone who was exactly where they needed to be. Chidinma had found the address through a note Adaeze had left on their group chat at 11 the previous night. A single line, no explanation. "Come and see something." Chidinma had shown up at 9 in the morning and stood in the doorway of the small shop and taken it all in, the shelving going up, the products arranged with Adaeze's characteristic precision, a hand-painted sign leaning against the wall that said, "Adaeze & Co. Hair, Beauty, Confidence." "You used his money." "I used my money," Adaeze said without looking up. "He put it in my account, my money." Chidinma looked around the shop slowly. Something warm was expanding in her chest. "Adaeze, do not. I am just saying. Chidinma, I swear, you did something real." Chidinma's voice was quiet and genuine. "With your own hands, no man involved, just you." Adaeze stopped arranging. She sat back on her heels and looked at the shelf in front of her and was quiet for a moment. Then she said in a voice stripped of everything except the truth of it, "It feels better than anything he ever bought me." Chidinma sat down on a crate and smiled. "I know." They stayed like that for a while. 2 women in a half-built shop, No drama, no emergency, just the uncomplicated pleasure of watching something good begin. Obinna's moment came and went without ceremony. Ugoma had filed. The lawyer's letter arrived on a Tuesday. He sat in his car outside the office building for a long time after. Gold watch on his wrist, expensive cologne in the air, everything he had used to define himself still intact, and none of it sufficient. He called Adaeze. The phone rang out. He did not call again. He had enough self-awareness left to understand that some doors, once they close from the inside, do not reopen for knocking. Like this video if Adaeze's redemption arc hits different. Subscribe and keep watching. The wedding is next and it is everything. The night before the traditional wedding, Tobechukwu came to Nkechi home and knocked. She opened the door and he was standing there in a plain white shirt and dark trousers. No watch, no suit, nothing managed or curated about him. He looked, for the first time since he had known him, completely unarmored. He had something in his hand, a small envelope, cream-colored, sealed. "I wrote it down," he said. "Everything I have held back, every version of the truth I edited before I gave it to you. I want you to read it tonight, before tomorrow, so that when you walk towards me in the morning, there is nothing between us that you have not seen." Nkechi looked at the envelope. Then she looked at his face. "Are you afraid?" he said, terrified. She took the envelope. She held it for a moment. Then she reached up and took his face in her hands the way she always did, her signature, her claiming of him, and she kissed him slowly and completely, and he stood in the doorway and held her waist with both hands and kissed him back with everything he had ever been afraid to give without terms or conditions. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were bright. "I will read it," she said, "and tomorrow I will tell you what I think." "And if it is too much?" he asked. She looked at him steadily. "Then I will tell you that too. But Tobechukwu, I already know your worst. I sat across from the woman who loves you enough to lose herself over you. I have seen what your past looks like with its face uncovered, and I am still standing in this doorway. I touched your jaw once. Read something into that." He exhaled slowly. Then he smiled, the real one, the one that came from somewhere deep and unguarded, and she felt it in her chest the way she always did. "Good night, Nkechi," he said. "Good night," she said, and closed the door. She read the letter twice. Then she sat with it in her lap and looked at the ring on her finger and thought about all the things love required that nobody told you about in advance. The patience, the excavation, the willingness to keep looking at someone after you had seen the parts they were ashamed of. She thought about her mother downstairs and Tobechukwu in the next room and Adaeze just somewhere across the city building something with her own hands, and Chidima who had held them all together through every fracture. And she thought that life was not clean and love was not clean, and the only question that ever actually mattered was whether what you were choosing was worth what it cost you. She decided it was. She slept deeply and without interruption for the first time in weeks. The morning of the traditional wedding arrived gold and loud.
Mama Tobechukwu had driven in from Enugu at dawn, arriving at the compound with the energy of a woman who had been waiting for this day for longer than she would say. She was warm-skinned, round-faced, natural grey hair under a magnificent gold and burgundy head tie. Stout and dignified in a deep burgundy lace blouse and wrapper with gold jewelry at her neck and wrists. She walked into the house and found Mama Nkechi already in the kitchen, and the two women looked at each other for exactly 1 second before Mama Tobechukwu said, "You must be the woman who raised her." And Mama Nkechi said, "And you must be the woman who raised him." And they had embraced like women who had been on the same side of something without knowing it. By mid-morning, the compound was transformed. Deep orange and gold ankara on every surface, music filling every corner, the particular joyful noise of a Nigerian celebration that had decided after everything to be absolutely unrestrained. chairs filled with family from both sides, children running between adult legs, someone's uncle already on the dance floor testing his knees. Chidinma was dressed in a deep green and gold ankara gown, natural hair adorned with gold pins, big expressive eyes, shining and slightly wet and actively lying about it. She had threatened anyone who mentioned her crying with consequences she did not specify, but delivered with enough conviction to be taken seriously. Adaeze arrived in deep burgundy lace, hair sleek and perfect, gold jewelry catching every light, slim figure moving through the compound with the easy authority of a woman who had decided to take up exactly the amount of space she deserved. She had organized half the decorations and personally vetted the caterers and would deny both facts if asked. She moved through the compound, checking things, fixing things, and every now and then she would stop and look at something, a floral arrangement, a table setting, the way the light was falling, and a small private smile would cross her face that had nothing to do with how things looked and everything to do with how they felt. Nkechi emerged from the house at 2 in the afternoon, and the compound went quiet. She wore a deep gold and burgundy traditional bridal ensemble, a fitted ashoke blouse and wrapper in rich woven fabric, her natural 4C hair adorned with a beaded crown threaded with gold, slim gold engagement ring on her left hand, small gold jewelry at her ears and neck. She walked with her mother beside her and her chin exactly parallel to the floor, and her big expressive eyes warm and steady and carrying no uncertainty in them at all. The compound erupted. Tobechukwu was waiting at the center of the ceremony space in a deep navy and gold agbada, the fabric falling perfectly from his broad shoulders, dark fitted trousers beneath, pointed dark shoes, silver watch at his wrist, his neat low-cut fade freshly done, his strong angular jaw relaxed, his dark calm eyes fixed on the entrance the moment she appeared and not moving from her for a single second of the walk toward him. When he reached him, he took both her hands and looked at her the way he had always looked at her, like she was the only thing in the room worth being steady for. He leaned down and said quietly, just for her, so that only she could hear it under the music and the noise and the joy filling the compound. I read the letter back to myself last night, and I want you to know that every word of it was the last secret. There is nothing left. You have all of me. Nkechi looked up at him. Her eyes were bright, and her chin was still level, and her voice was even when she said, I know. I could tell the moment I opened the door last night. She squeezed his hands. You finally stopped managing and just showed up. That is all I ever wanted. He brought her hands to his lips and closed his eyes for a moment, and she felt his exhale against her fingers. The wine was poured. The prayers rose. The oldest uncle on Tobechukwu's side blessed the union in Igbo, and then in English for the Lagos contingent. And there was laughter, and there was clapping, and there was the particular organized chaos of a Nigerian traditional wedding finding its full joyful stride. At some point in the evening, when the dancing had been going for 2 hours, and the food had been replenished twice, and the music had shifted from traditional to Afrobeat and back again, Adaeze and Chidinma found themselves sitting side by side at the edge of the compound, watching Nkechi and Tobechukwu dance in the center of everything, her head tipped back laughing at something he had said, his arms around her, both of them entirely unhurried and entirely present. Chidinma was crying quietly. She had been doing it on and off for 3 hours and had stopped trying to hide it. Adaeze was not crying. She was watching with an expression that was open and unguarded and genuinely, cleanly happy, the kind of happy that has no envy underneath it, no calculation, no condition. Chidinma nudged her arm. How does it feel being happy for her with nothing attached to it? Adaeze was quiet for a moment. The music swelled. Nkechi laughed again across the compound, the sound carrying over everything. Like something I should have tried sooner, she said. Chidema smiled and leaned her head on Adaze's arm, and Adaeze let her, which was its own kind of miracle, and the two of them sat together watching their friend dance in the gold evening light with the man she had almost lost before she fully had him. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If this story moved you, if you watched all 3 parts and felt every single moment, comment below right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from. Lagos, London, Atlanta, Toronto, Johannesburg, Houston, Dubai, wherever you are, we want to see you. Drop your city in the comments, like this video, share it with one person who loves a good Nigerian love story, and subscribe because we have more stories coming that will hold you just like this one did. Thank you for watching all parts. We made this for you. We will see you in the next one.